The feeling of humiliation enveloped the entire space. "Don't you understand your place yet, Clarence?" A sharp, cold voice rang out, interrupting the rhythm of the broom. Clarence looked up, his calm eyes meeting Leonard Baxter, the operations manager of Jackson Enterprises. Leonard stood there, tall in an expensive suit, holding a glass of cold water, his eyes filled with contempt. "You're nothing but a janitor, nothing at all. Clean this floor again, until I can see my reflection clearly in it, or don't ever come back here." Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. Clarence took a slight breath, his voice steady and humble. "Sir, I've already cleaned this floor several times." He maintained a calm expression, his hands still gripping the broom handle, as if Leonard's words couldn't touch him. But Leonard wouldn't tolerate that calmness. Without another word, he stepped closer, tilted the glass of cold water, and poured it directly onto Clarence's head. The icy water cascaded over the silver wig, running down his face, soaking his uniform. Drops fell to the floor, shattering on the freshly polished surface, forming a small puddle at his feet. Clarence froze, his breath trembling slightly from the sudden cold. The gray uniform clung to his shoulders, drenched, with water dripping from his hair to his neck, chilling him to the bone. A few young employees nearby, holding briefcases, witnessed the scene but didn't dare speak. They lowered their heads, hurrying away, as if afraid Leonard's gaze would land on them. The sudden cold startled you, but what truly stunned you was the deliberate malice of that act. Leonard mocked, his voice dripping with triumph. "Now you've got something real to clean, Clarence." He turned away, walking off with a smug air, his leather shoes clicking on the floor, leaving faint smudges on the shiny surface. The hallway fell silent, save for the sound of water dripping from Clarence's hair onto the floor. But Leonard could never have guessed that the man he'd just humiliated wasn't a frail janitor, but Samuel Jackson, the very person who built Jackson Enterprises from nothing. Clarence, or rather Samuel, stood still, his hands tightening around the broom handle. The water still dripped, but what pained him wasn't the cold. It was the raw cruelty of Leonard's act. This was the company he had founded, once a symbol of respect and fairness, now a playground for people like Leonard Baxter, who were ready to trample others just to assert their power. Samuel bent down, slowly wiping the drops of water from the floor. Each movement was deliberate, as if he were wiping away the rising tide of disappointment. He wasn't here for fun. Whispers from old friends about the company's decline had made it impossible for him to sit idly by. Rumors of arrogant managers, unfair treatment of low-level employees, and signs of power abuse had driven him to disguise himself as Clarence Wright. He needed to see firsthand what was happening, especially since the company was now in the hands of his son, Marcus Jackson, whom he worried might be blinded. Leonard Baxter might think he'd just won, but he didn't know his action had ignited a fire of determination in Samuel. Samuel didn't let emotions take over. Leonard's act was just the beginning, a sign that the problems in Jackson Enterprises ran deeper than he'd thought. Samuel knew he had to dig deeper, to see everything clearly before acting. Samuel straightened up, pushing the janitorial cart toward the end of the hallway. The steady sound of the wheels echoed in the quiet space, like a silent reminder he wasn't here to clean floors, but to uncover the truth. The fluorescent lights shone down on the marble floor, casting his shadow long, like a ghost of the past that wouldn't let go. No one in this towering building knew that the man they just passed was Samuel Jackson, the one who'd built this empire with his bare hands, and now he wouldn't let anyone destroy it. The hallway on the 38th floor of Jackson Enterprises remained gleaming, but a sense of unease began to thicken in the air. Samuel, under the guise of Clarence Wright, continued pushing his cart through the hidden corners of the magnificent building in the heart of Atlanta, Georgia. After the incident with Leonard Baxter, he no longer believed the wrongs in the company were mere accidents. The cold from the water splashed in his face during that meeting still lingered on his skin, not from the water, but from the betrayal. But instead of breaking, Samuel chose to stand, cold, clear-headed, and free of illusions. Now, he saw more clearly than ever, If he wanted to save Jackson Enterprises, he had to start from the shadows, where he'd once brought light. That day, as Samuel was cleaning a small office on the executive floor, the door swung open. Calvin Reed, the marketing director, stepped in, holding a coffee cup, his eyes gliding over Samuel as if he were an object. Calvin, younger than Leonard, matched him in arrogance. He paused, glanced at the papers on the desk, then turned to Samuel. "Clarence, clean this desk for me," Calvin ordered, his voice curt but commanding. Samuel nodded, set the broom aside, and approached with a rag. He wiped the desk until it gleamed, reflecting the light, but Calvin smirked and deliberately dropped a stack of papers onto the floor. The white sheets scattered, some sticking to an old coffee stain. "You're nothing but a janitor, Clarence," Calvin said coldly. "Pick them up, then clean the desk again. Hurry up, I don't have time for your dawdling." He sipped his coffee, his mocking eyes watching as Samuel bent to gather the papers. Samuel stayed silent, his hands slowly collecting the papers and stacking them neatly on the desk. He wiped the desk again, each movement steady, but inside, a fire smoldered. Calvin wasn't just humiliating him, he treated trampling others as entertainment. Samuel held back, but his eyes quietly followed Calvin as he left, his polished shoes leaving a small smudge on the floor. He knew he couldn't stop here. Leonard Baxter wasn't the only one, and Calvin Reed had just put himself on the list to watch. Less than an hour later, while Samuel was cleaning glass in the meeting area, another voice cut through, sharp as a blade. "What are you doing here, Clarence?" Samuel turned to face Vanessa Holt, the vice president of sales. She stood there, hands on hips, her icy gaze sweeping over him. "I don't want people like you lingering near the meeting rooms. Finish the glass and get out." "Miss Holt, I'm just doing my job," Samuel replied, keeping Clarence Wright's humble tone. But Vanessa didn't care. She stepped forward, pointing at the freshly cleaned glass. "Your job? Then why do I still see smudges here?" she said, her voice dripping with disdain. She raised her hand, deliberately touching the glass with ink-stained fingers, leaving a small mark. "Clean it again, and do it right this time. You're nothing here, Clarence. Don't make me repeat myself." Samuel looked at the ink smudge, then at Vanessa as she turned and walked away, her high heels clicking on the floor. He bent down, wiped the mark clean, but in his mind, a question repeated. How had his company become a place that harbored people like this? Vanessa Holt, with her professional facade and commanding tone, was no different from Leonard or Calvin, all ready to crush others to assert their status. As Samuel pushed his cart through the employee break area, he witnessed another scene. Elena Torres, another janitor, stood with her head bowed before Leonard Baxter. Elena was petite, her hands trembling as she held a rag, her eyes filled with fear. Leonard loomed over her, holding a bottle of glass cleaner, his voice booming like a shout. "Did you spill this, Elena?" Leonard growled, pointing at a small puddle on the floor. "Where do you think you are, making a mess like this? Clean it up now, or I'll fire you." Elena stammered, her voice shaking. "Mr. Baxter, I'm sorry, it wasn't on purpose." She knelt, frantically wiping the floor, but Leonard didn't stop. He tilted the bottle, pouring more liquid onto the floor in front of her, then smirked. "Now you've got something real to clean," Leonard said triumphantly. He turned and walked away, leaving Elena kneeling, tears silently falling into the puddle she was wiping. Samuel stood a short distance away, his hands gripping the broom handle tightly. He wanted to step forward, to confront Leonard right then, but he knew he couldn't break Clarence Wright's role. Instead, he approached Elena, gently helping her stand. "Let me help you," he said, his voice low and warm. Elena looked up, surprised, but still fearful. "Thank you, Clarence, but you don't have to. I don't want you to get in trouble," she whispered. Samuel didn't reply, just quietly cleaned the puddle with her. Through a few short words, he learned Elena was a single mother, working tirelessly to support her child. The helplessness in her voice pained him further. When Elena left, Samuel stood alone in the empty hallway. He realized the injustice wasn't just aimed at him. It spread to people like Elena, who had no voice to defend themselves. Leonard, Calvin, Vanessa, they weren't just arrogant individuals. They were symbols of a toxic culture eroding Jackson Enterprises. Samuel knew he needed evidence, something concrete to expose them. He reached into his uniform pocket, pulling out a small recorder he'd carried from the start. With every act of humiliation he witnessed, his resolve grew stronger. Samuel activated the recorder, hid it in the cart, and continued his work. He wouldn't just observe anymore, he'd capture everything, every word, every action, to ensure people like Leonard Baxter couldn't keep running rampant. After what he'd seen from Leonard Baxter, Calvin Reed, and Vanessa Holt, Samuel had no doubt the injustice wasn't a few random incidents, but a part of the company's culture. The small recorder, hidden in the cart, became his secret weapon, and each day, his determination to gather enough evidence to expose those destroying his legacy grew stronger. That day, while Samuel's wiping down a table in the employee break area, Calvin Reed walked in, holding a steaming coffee cup. He looked at Samuel with contempt, then set the cup on the freshly cleaned table. "Clarence, what's taking you so long?" Calvin growled, his voice sharp. Without waiting for a reply, he tilted the cup, spilling hot coffee across the table. The brown liquid spread, dripping onto the floor, steaming. Samuel froze, his hands tightening on the rag. "Mr. Reed, I just finished cleaning this table," he said, maintaining Clarence Wright's humble tone. But Calvin didn't care. He smirked, a cruel smile spreading. "Then clean it again, Clarence," Calvin mocked. "You're nothing but a janitor. Don't think you're important. Hurry up, I don't like waiting." He turned away, walking off smugly, leaving Samuel standing there, staring at the coffee pooling on the floor. Samuel bent down, cleaning the table and floor, each movement steady. The heat from the coffee seeped through the rag, but what boiled inside him was Calvin's cruelty. This wasn't the first time Calvin had done this, and Samuel knew it wouldn't be the last. He quietly activated the recorder, letting it run in his uniform pocket, capturing Calvin's fading footsteps. Every word, every action, was another piece in the picture Samuel was building, a picture of Jackson Enterprises' corruption. Less than an hour later, while Samuel was cleaning near the meeting rooms, another voice cut through, sharp as a knife. "Clarence, what the hell are you doing here?" Samuel turned to face Vanessa Holt. She stood there, hands on hips, her cold gaze sweeping over him. "I told you not to linger near the meeting rooms. Are you deaf, Miss Holt?" "I'm just emptying the trash," Samuel replied, keeping his voice calm. But Vanessa didn't stop. She stepped forward, pointing at the freshly replaced trash bin. "Emptying the trash? Then why did I hear noise here?" she growled. She raised her hand, deliberately knocking the bin over. Papers, coffee cans, and debris spilled across the floor. "Pick it all up, Clarence, and clean the floor. You're nothing here. Don't make me repeat myself." Samuel looked at the mess, then at Vanessa as she turned and walked away, her heels clicking loudly. He bent down, picking up each piece, returning them to the bin, then wiped the floor clean. But inside, a fire burned. Vanessa wasn't just humiliating him. She turned contempt into a power game. Samuel knew she, along with Leonard and Calvin, was turning the company into a place with no room for respect. As Samuel pushed his cart through the supply closet area, he found Elena Torres sitting alone, her eyes red. He approached, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Elena, what's wrong?" he asked, his voice warm. Elena looked up, wiping tears quickly. "Mr. Baxter, he yelled at me in front of everyone," she whispered. "I spilled some glass cleaner, and he called me useless, threatened to fire me. I don't know what to do, Clarence." Her voice trembled. Samuel sat beside her, listening. Through her halting words, he learned Elena was a single mother, working tirelessly to send her child to college. The helplessness in her eyes broke his heart. "You're not useless, Elena," he said. "Don't let them make you think that. We'll get through this." Elena gave a weak smile, but her eyes still held worry. "Thank you, Clarence, but be careful. Mr. Baxter doesn't spare anyone." Samuel nodded, patting her shoulder as she left. He stood there, watching her small figure, feeling a new weight on his shoulders. Before he could leave the closet, hurried footsteps approached. Javier Ruiz, a young janitor, ran up, his face pale. "Clarence, Miss Holt just chewed me out," Javier said, his voice panicked. "I refused unpaid overtime, and she said she'd fire me if I didn't obey." Samuel looked at Javier, seeing the fear in his eyes. "Why did you refuse?" he asked. "My family needs me home early," Javier replied. "I'm the only one earning money, but Miss Holt didn't care. She said I'm nothing." He lowered his head, his hands shaking. Samuel placed a hand on Javier's shoulder, his voice low but firm. "You're not wrong, Javier. Don't let them scare you." He glanced at the floor, then at the cart where the recorder was running. "I'll handle this." Samuel pushed the cart through the final turn, before stopping at the small door to the supply closet. As Javier left, Samuel stood alone in the cramped, stifling space. The neon lights still glowed behind him, but this felt like another world, cut off from the pretense outside. Here, he was no longer Clarence Wright, but himself. The injustice he faced wasn't just personal. It silently choked people like Elena Torres, like Javier Ruiz, workers with no voice, caught in an invisible machine he'd once helped create. Samuel breathed slowly, pulling the recorder from the cart, checking it again. The light still blinked. It was still recording, but he knew it wasn't enough. Recordings were just the start. To expose the full truth, he needed more, undeniable evidence, pieces to topple the system. Samuel was no stranger to their cruelty, but it only made him more resolute. The small recorder stayed tucked in the cart, silently capturing every word, every step, every breath, like a quiet vow that he wouldn't stop. Not for personal honor, but for those never heard, people like Elena and Javier, who, if he didn't act, would forever be drowned in silence. That evening, as Samuel was cleaning the main area of the executive floor, a group emerged from the elevator. Loud laughter, mixed with Leonard Baxter's familiar voice. Samuel looked up, seeing Leonard leading, followed by a few young managers, all in expensive suits, their eyes arrogant. Leonard paused when he saw Samuel, his smile turning into a cruel smirk. "Look who we have here," Leonard said, his voice mocking. Clarence Wright, the old janitor still clinging to this job. He stepped closer, holding a glass of cold water, his gaze scanning Samuel like prey. "You still don't know your place, do you, Clarence? You're nothing here." Samuel stayed silent, his hands gripping the broom, his eyes calmly meeting Leonard's. "Mr. Baxter, I'm just doing my job," he replied, Clarence Wright's humble voice, steady. But Leonard wouldn't accept that calm. He tilted his head, his eyes flashing with malice. "Your job," Leonard growled. "Then let me give you more work." Without another word, he tilted the glass, pouring cold water over Samuel's head again. The icy water poured over the silver wig, running down his face, soaking his uniform. Drops fell to the floor, shattering on the polished surface, forming a small puddle at his feet. Samuel froze, his breath trembling from the sudden cold. The gray uniform clung to his shoulders, drenched, with water dripping from his hair to his neck, chilling him to the bone. Leonard and the young manager's laughter rang out, sharp as knives, echoing in the empty hallway. "The cold startled you, but the deliberate malice of that act is what really stunned you," Leonard mocked, his voice triumphant. "Learn your place, Clarence. Clean this floor now, or don't ever show your face here again." He turned, signaling the young managers to follow, leaving Samuel standing there, water still dripping from his hair to the floor. The young managers glanced at Samuel, some smirked, others avoided his eyes, then hurried after Leonard. The hallway fell silent again, save for the dripping water and Samuel's heavy breathing. He stood still, his hands gripping the broom until his knuckles whitened. The cold water soaked through his uniform, but that chill was nothing compared to the anger smoldering inside. This wasn't the first time Leonard had done this, but now, the humiliation was public, a performance of power. Samuel bent down, slowly wiping the puddle from the floor. Each movement was steady, but in his mind, a question repeated. How had his company fallen into the hands of people like Leonard Baxter? He recalled a fleeting image of Marcus Jackson, his son, now leading the company. Did Marcus know what was happening? Samuel wasn't sure, but he knew this couldn't continue. As he stood, a small figure appeared from the hallway's corner. Javier Ruiz ran up, his face pale, eyes full of worry. "Clarence, I just saw Miss Holt force me to work overtime again," Javier said, his voice trembling. "She dumped trash on the floor and made me pick it up, just because I refused to work late. I don't know what to do." Samuel looked at Javier, seeing the fear in his eyes. He placed a hand on his shoulder, his voice low but firm. "You're not wrong, Javier. Don't let them make you feel worthless." He glanced at the floor, then at the cart where the recorder was running. "I'll take care of this." Javier nodded, a flicker of hope in his eyes, then hurried off. Samuel stood alone in the empty hallway. Leonard's humiliation didn't break him. Instead, it fueled a fiercer determination. He wasn't fighting just for himself, but for Elena, Javier, and everyone trampled in this company. Leonard, Calvin, Vanessa, they thought he was invisible, but they didn't know he was ready to turn the tables. Samuel checked the recorder, ensuring it was still running. He pulled a small camera from his uniform pocket, hiding it in the cart, deciding to not only record audio but capture video from now on. He wouldn't let acts like Leonard's pass without consequences. That evening, as Samuel was cleaning near a small meeting room on the executive floor, an unexpected sound came from behind the thick wooden door. Low voices mixed with soft laughter, like a secret conversation. Samuel stopped, his hands tightening on the broom, his sharp eyes scanning the empty hallway. He recognized Leonard Baxter's voice, but there were others he knew too well. Calvin Reed, Vanessa Holt, and another he hadn't expected, Diane Fowler, the HR director. Samuel quietly moved closer to the empty meeting room, where faint light spilled through a cracked door. He pushed his cart against the wall, hiding his shadow under the fluorescent lights. Bending down, he pretended to clean the marble floor, but his right hand deftly activated the recorder hidden in his uniform pocket. Sounds drifted from the room, low, urgent, familiar names, voices he'd once trusted. He froze when he heard one name clearly: Marcus, his son, the heir he'd entrusted everything to, now the target of a silent coup. He gripped the broom tighter, his knuckles whitening, his breathing slowed, trying to stay calm to catch every detail. "We've already siphoned enough from the operating fund," a voice said, cold, smug. "Calvin Reed, that money's been funneled into shell companies under our names," he continued. "As long as Marcus is still CEO, we can't go public, but once he's out, it'll vanish like it never existed." A short laugh echoed in the small space. Samuel felt his heart tighten, but he didn't move. Every second, every word was recorded. The evidence lay neatly in the small device hidden in his pocket. Every word, every plan of betrayal, every crack silently tearing Jackson Enterprises apart from within. This time, he wouldn't let them succeed. "And the tech secrets?" Vanessa Holt asked, her voice sharp. "Next Gen Solutions is ready to pay big for them. I've prepared the necessary documents. Once Marcus is gone, we sell everything and split it." Samuel felt his blood run cold. Next Gen Solutions, Jackson Enterprises' biggest competitor, was waiting to swallow the company he'd spent his life building. But what stunned him most was the next voice. Diane Fowler, his trusted colleague from the early days. "The fake financial data is ready," Diane said, her voice steady but cold. "I'll make sure the board believes Marcus is a failure. No one will suspect a thing. Leonard, you'll be the new CEO, and we'll be richer than ever." Leonard's laugh rang out, sharp as a blade. "Good work, Diane. Once Marcus is out, Jackson Enterprises is ours, and old man Samuel Jackson can't do a thing." Retired and clueless, Samuel stood still, water dripping from the rag to the floor, but he no longer heard that sound. In his mind, everything spun. Leonard, Calvin, Vanessa, and Diane. They weren't just humiliating employees or abusing power. They were plotting to betray Marcus, embezzle funds, and sell the company to its enemy. Their malice had no limits, and what hurt most was Diane, who'd stood by him in the toughest days. Now a conspirator, he quietly turned off the recorder, checking that it captured the entire conversation. This audio was the evidence he needed, not just to expose injustice, but to save the company from these traitors. Samuel stood tall, pushing the cart away from the meeting area, his eyes sharper than ever. He couldn't believe those he'd trusted had gone this far, but shock quickly gave way to fierce determination. Leonard might think he'd become CEO, Calvin and Vanessa might dream of money, Diane might believe she'd hidden everything perfectly, but they didn't know Clarence Wright had heard it all. Samuel Jackson, who they thought was retired and useless, was still here, and he wouldn't let them win. He checked the small camera in the cart, ensuring it was ready for the next steps. The recording was the start, but he needed to talk to Marcus immediately. Samuel kept pushing the cart, but his steps were heavier now, carrying the weight of a man who'd just uncovered a horrifying truth. They wanted to topple his son, to destroy the company he'd built, but Samuel wouldn't let that happen. He needed to act fast, to get this evidence to Marcus, before their plot came to fruition. In that moment, Marcus's image flashed in Samuel's mind, his son, whom he'd trusted with everything. Marcus didn't know about this plot, but Samuel would ensure he was protected. He clenched his fist, feeling a burning resolve. Leonard Baxter and his allies might think they held power, but Samuel Jackson, as Clarence Wright, was ready to end their game. Late at night, the dim streetlights glowed through the window of Marcus Jackson's quiet apartment. Inside, the warm space with family photos on the walls felt heavy as Samuel Jackson, still in Clarence Wright's wrinkled janitor uniform, walked in. After uncovering the betrayal plot by Leonard Baxter, Calvin Reed, Vanessa Holt, and Diane Fowler, Samuel couldn't wait. He needed to meet his son now, to deliver the evidence before their vicious plan succeeded. The recorder in his uniform pocket was his only weapon, and he knew he had to act fast. Marcus, sitting on the sofa with a laptop on his lap, looked up as Samuel entered. He stood, eyes wide with surprise. "Dad, why are you in a janitor's uniform? What's going on?" Marcus asked, his voice laced with worry. Samuel closed the door, stepping closer to his son. He removed the silver wig and glasses, revealing his true face. "Marcus, sit down. I have something important to tell you," he said, his voice low but firm. Marcus frowned, sat, and kept his eyes on his father. "I've been posing as Clarence Wright, a janitor to work at Jackson Enterprises again," Samuel began, placing the small recorder on the cold wooden table. "I heard whispers about unrest in the company, about opaque decisions, shady investments. I couldn't sit by watching you carry a legacy I built, while it was cracking day by day. But what I found is far worse than I imagined." Marcus leaned forward, his eyes a mix of confusion and worry. "What do you mean? What did you see in there?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. Without answering right away, Samuel pressed play. The room fell silent as the recording started. Covertly captured conversations, whispered exchanges between familiar names. Diane, Baxter, a few other voices, all talking about a plan, selling the company to NextGen, quietly ousting Marcus, and erasing the Jackson family's influence from the board entirely. When the recording ended, Samuel looked at his son. There was nothing more to say. Marcus sat frozen, his face pale as paper, his hands clenched into fists on his thighs. "Dad, is this real?" he whispered, eyes fixed on the recorder. His voice broke, as if trying to hold back the anger rising in his chest. "They want to overthrow me? And Diane, who called you her friend, she's in on it too?" Samuel nodded slowly. "Sometimes, betrayal comes from those we trust most. But you're not alone, Marcus. I'm here, not to lead, but to fight with you." Samuel placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder, his eyes sharp but warm. "Yes, Marcus, I didn't want to believe it either, but I heard it all. Leonard, Calvin, Vanessa, and Diane, they're not just humiliating employees, they're betraying you, betraying the company I built. I've recorded and filmed a lot, but this is the clearest evidence." Marcus stood, pacing the room, running a hand through his hair. "I can't believe this. I trusted them, thought they were just overzealous. But this, they want to destroy everything. He turned back, eyes blazing. Dad, what do we do now? Samuel stood tall, his voice low but resolute. We'll confront them, Marcus. I want to call an emergency board meeting. I'll appear one last time as Clarence Wright, so they don't suspect. Then we'll reveal this evidence. You need to prepare financial documents from someone trustworthy to prove they've been embezzling. Marcus nodded, his eyes regaining calm. I have an honest accountant who suspected the numbers but didn't dare speak. I'll have him check everything tonight. He paused, looking at Samuel with pride. Dad, thank you for doing this. I didn't know how bad the company had gotten. Samuel gave a faint smile, patting his son's shoulder. I did this for you, Marcus, and for people like Elena, Javier, those without a voice. We'll take the company back, set it right. Before leaving, Samuel returned to Jackson Enterprises one last time as Clarence Wright. He pushed the cart through the hallway, deliberately pausing near the HR office. Diane Fowler stepped out, her cold eyes sweeping over him. Clarence, what are you doing here at this hour? She asked, her voice sharp. Miss Fowler, I'm just reporting unfair treatment of the janitorial staff, Samuel said, keeping his humble tone. Employees forced to work unpaid overtime, humiliated. Diane cut him off, her eyes contemptuous. Janitors don't get to change anything, Clarence. Clean the floor, that's your job. She turned and walked away, not suspecting the man before her was Samuel Jackson. Samuel watched her go, his heart aching. Her indifference only strengthened his resolve. He checked the recorder, ensuring it captured the brief exchange. Everything was ready. He pushed the cart out of the hallway, his eyes sharper than ever. Back at Marcus's apartment, Samuel sat with his son, reviewing the financial documents the accountant had sent. Diane's falsified numbers were clear, matching the recording's words. Marcus clenched his fists, his voice low. They won't get away, Dad. Tomorrow, we end this. Samuel nodded, his eyes blazing. Yes, Marcus. Tomorrow Leonard, Calvin, Vanessa, and Diane will face the truth. I'm proud you're ready to stand up. He stood, putting on Clarence Wright's uniform again, preparing for the board meeting. The apartment hallway was quiet, but in Samuel's heart, a fierce resolve burned. He'd heard the plot, had the evidence, and now, with Marcus, he'd take back Jackson Enterprises from the traitors. The boardroom on the top floor of Jackson Enterprises in central Atlanta, Georgia, gleamed under the crystal chandelier. The long walnut table shone, surrounded by luxurious leather chairs, where board members sat with stern faces. Outside in the hallway, Clarence Wright, Samuel Jackson pushed his cart back and forth, his sharp eyes watching each person enter. Today was the decisive day. After revealing the betrayal plot to Marcus Jackson, Samuel and his son had prepared thoroughly. The audio recording, video from the small camera, and falsified financial documents from the honest accountant. They wouldn't let Leonard Baxter, Calvin Reed, Vanessa Holt, and Diane Fowler escape their crimes. Leonard entered the meeting room first, his expensive suit fitting tightly, a smug smile on his lips. Calvin followed, holding a coffee cup, his usual arrogant gaze. Vanessa came next, her heels clicking loudly, her face cold. Finally, Diane, her professional exterior, hiding the betrayal within. They sat, exchanging confident glances, unaware that Clarence Wright was in the hallway, silently watching. Marcus opened the meeting, standing from the chairman's seat, his voice low but firm. Today we have a serious issue to address, he said, his eyes sweeping over each person. There's evidence of betrayal within this company, threatening not just me, but Jackson Enterprises itself. Leonard smirked, interrupting immediately. Betrayal? What are you talking about, Marcus? You're too green. Don't waste our time with nonsense. He chuckled, looking at the board with feigned confidence. Marcus didn't respond, nodding to a technician. The large screen lit up, and Samuel's recording began to play. Leonard's voice came through clearly. We need to get Marcus out of the CEO chair. The kid's too young, not strong enough to hold the company. I'll take his place. Then Calvin, I've funneled millions into shell companies we control. Then Vanessa, Next Gen Solutions is ready to pay big for the tech secrets. Finally, Diane, the fake financial data is ready. I'll make sure the board believes Marcus is a failure. The room fell into a deadly silence. Leonard paled, trying to stand. What is this? It's fake. Who dares pull this stunt? He roared, but his trembling voice betrayed his panic. Calvin dropped his coffee cup, the liquid spilling across the table, his eyes darting in fear. Vanessa sat frozen, her hands clenched, while Diane lowered her head, tears falling silently. Marcus raised a hand, silencing the room. This isn't fake, Leonard, and you'll soon know who's behind it. He turned to the door, calling loudly, Clarence, come in. The door opened, and Samuel walked in, wearing the faded gray janitor's uniform, pushing his cart. The board members frowned, whispering, but Leonard, Calvin, Vanessa, and Diane stared, their eyes shifting from shock to terror. Samuel stopped in the center, removing his silver wig and glasses, revealing his true face, Samuel Jackson, the founder of Jackson Enterprises. The room erupted in murmurs. Leonard shot up, pointing at Samuel. How are you here? You retired, he shouted, his voice cracking with shock. Samuel stepped closer to the table, his icy gaze sweeping over each of them. I never left this company, Leonard, he said, his voice low but commanding. I posed as Clarence Wright to see firsthand what was happening, and what I saw, what I heard, was betrayal from all of you. He pointed at Leonard. You humiliated me, humiliated employees, and plotted to overthrow my son. He turned to Calvin. You embezzled company funds, thinking no one would notice. Then to Vanessa. You were ready to sell our tech secrets to the enemy. Finally, he looked at Diane, his voice faltering with pain. And you, Diane, who I trusted, helped them destroy everything. Diane sobbed, her voice trembling. Samuel, I didn't want to. They forced me. But Samuel raised a hand, cutting her off. No excuses, Diane, he said coldly. I have all the evidence, recordings, videos, the fake financials Marcus verified. You didn't just betray me, you betrayed thousands of employees working for this company. Marcus stood beside his father, his voice ringing out strong. I propose the board fire Leonard Baxter, Calvin Reed, Vanessa Holt, and Diane Fowler, immediately. They don't belong here. Leonard lunged, trying to grab the recorder from the table, but security, already called, restrained him. You can't do this. I'll sue, he screamed, but no one on the board cared. Calvin pointed at Vanessa, deflecting blame. It was her idea. I just followed. Vanessa stayed silent, her eyes empty, while Diane sobbed, unable to look up. The board chairman, an older man, stood, his voice stern. We've heard enough. The evidence is clear. Leonard Baxter, Calvin Reed, Vanessa Holt, Diane Fowler, you're fired immediately. Security, escort them out. Security stepped forward, pulling each one from the room. Leonard struggled, shouting empty threats. Calvin shuffled out with his head down. Vanessa walked silently, and Diane cried, her eyes begging Samuel for forgiveness. But Samuel just stood there, his gaze cold as they left. When the door closed, the room returned to silence. Samuel turned to Marcus, placing a hand on his shoulder. We did it, Marcus, he said, his voice warm. But this is just the start. We have to get the company back on track. Marcus nodded, his eyes blazing. I'll do it, Dad, with your help. The board members applauded, their eyes filled with respect for Samuel, the man who quietly saved the company from traitors. After the storm in the boardroom, the atmosphere at Jackson Enterprises in central Atlanta, Georgia, slowly settled. Samuel and Marcus Jackson didn't rest. After their victory, they dove into restructuring the company, determined to restore the values Samuel had set from the start. Marcus gathered all employees in the Grand Hall, publicly apologizing for letting injustice linger. He introduced an anonymous feedback channel, raised wages for low-level staff, and organized manager training on respect. Samuel, though no longer Clarence Wright, appeared at an internal ceremony. He presented awards to Elena Torres, and Javier Ruiz, who'd endured oppression with resilience. Elena smiled, her eyes teary, while Javier gripped Samuel's hand, whispering thanks. Looking at them, Samuel knew his journey wasn't in vain. He retired fully, handing the company to Marcus, but remained a silent advisor. He began writing a book about his undercover experience, hoping to inspire others to fight injustice. Jackson Enterprises gradually revived, becoming a symbol of a fair workplace in Atlanta. A year later, at an anniversary event, Samuel took the stage, his eyes shining as he looked at the crowd. "Justice and compassion are the foundation of success," he said, his voice warm. "I saw this company fall into the hands of traitors, but with Marcus and all of you, we took it back. This is a lesson for everyone. No one is invisible, and every voice matters." The hall erupted in applause. Samuel looked at Marcus, proud to see his son leading with strength and compassion. His story spread, becoming a symbol of the fight against workplace injustice, not just in Atlanta, but beyond. The story "Black Old Man Goes Undercover" as cleaner to test employees. Shocked, he fired them immediately. That I've rewritten reflects real issues in American life today, especially in workplaces where injustice, abuse of power, and betrayal persist. The setting at Jackson Enterprises in Atlanta, Georgia, with protagonist Samuel Jackson, an older black man posing as Clarence Wright, highlights discrimination and contempt toward low-level workers, a reality not uncommon in modern American companies. Leonard Baxter pouring water on Samuel's head, Calvin Reed spilling coffee on a table, and Vanessa Holt dumping trash to humiliate reflect a toxic culture where power is used to oppress rather than uplift. Their plot to oust Marcus Jackson and sell the company to Next Gen Solutions mirrors corporate scandals in America, like cases of embezzlement or insider data sales we see in the news. The lesson from this story isn't just Samuel's perseverance, but the importance of listening and acting for those seen as invisible in today's American society, like Elena Torres and Javier Ruiz, immigrant workers or single mothers often overlooked. Americans can apply this by speaking up against workplace injustice, whether through anonymous feedback channels like Marcus set up, or by documenting evidence like Samuel with his recorder. Jackson Enterprises restructuring shows change doesn't come from silence, but from courage to face those abusing power. Learn from Samuel, don't wait for others to fix wrongs. You must start, because a fair workplace isn't just a right, it's a responsibility for all of us. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow inspiring stories like Samuel Jackson's journey. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video to explore more lessons on justice and courage.